Hey guys, Freddy here. Welcome back to another retro adventure. The end of another week, the end of another poll. We've got a fantastic win for Palace of the Silver Princess, a Dungeons & Dragons adventure. Now this is going to be a review of the PDF on the computer, because this will be a review of the version that Wizard of the Coast released many years later, which is the original, but we'll come to that during the review. Now as usual, I'll be back at the end of the video with some other channel related stuff and some other poll related stuff. But before I do that, I'd like to take a moment to talk about my Patreons, who this week I have been told are incredibly generous with their healing potions. And this is just like them, because they're generous with their time and with their efforts in supporting the channel and making all of this possible, and their efforts are massively appreciated. Now if you'd like to join them and help support the channel, and I sure wish you would, or you'd like to see these videos a week early, or you'd like to gain access to one of the other levels of patronage we've got, then we've got a Patreon in the description down below. If you check it out, it'd be very much appreciated. But anyway, let's have a look at Palace of the Silver Princess. So, this is Palace of the Silver Princess, Dungeon Module B3, which was released in 1981 by TSR for Dungeons & Dragons. And it's the first adventure written entirely by a woman. Before that, we'd had the very first published adventure, Palace of the Vampire Queen, which was written by a husband and wife team. This was the first time TSR published something entirely by a woman. Or is it? Because this was withdrawn from sale the day it came out. This is the yellow covered version. And while they then republished it with a green cover, virtually every word in it had been rewritten by Tom Moldvay. And nothing remained of Gene Wells' original. Now, why did this happen? Well, apparently on the day it came out, when staffers had been issued their personal copies, it had been sent out to shops and shipping companies, one of the management of TSR was leafing through it, and Dungeon Modules, the B series, were targeted towards younger audience. And they found some items they didn't like. While the artwork in it isn't as bad as books they published around the time, the fact that it's targeted towards a younger audience they found very dodgy, and they withdrew it from sale. They ordered shops to return it, shipping companies to return theirs. They even sent people round the offices lifting the copies off people's desks. Obviously some people had gone home with copies and they got out, and those copies these days fetch a very high price, because it's one of the rarest modules. Because of that. Now, while that's the story that goes around, there's also the story that goes around that one of the pieces of artwork in it had heads on one of the monsters which resembled the management team or some of the designers of Dungeons & Dragons, and they took offence at that, and that's why it was withdrawn, for much more personal reasons. And we'll come to that art as we go through. But one of the reasons why it was rewritten was because this is kind of out there. It introduces a bunch of new monsters, and when it was rewritten to use just ones out of the base game, to make it far more ordinary. Now the adventure itself, when Gene Wells wrote it, she wrote it like some of the very early modules, where certain rooms are blank. There's a description for them, but there's nothing what's going in there, what traps and things, to allow dungeon masters to put in stuff of their own. Wherein Tom Moldvay, when he rewrote it, he put something in every room. But anyway, years ago the valley was green, and the animals ran free through golden fields of green. The Princess Argenta ruled over the peaceful land, and the people were secure and happy. Then one day a warrior riding a red dragon appeared in the skies over the princess's castle, and almost overnight the kingdom fell into ruin. Now only ruins and rumours remain, and what legends there are tell of a fabulous ruby still buried somewhere within the Palace of the Silver Princess. This module is for use with D&D Basic rules, and is specifically designed for beginning players and DMs. Contained within the maps of the palace and its dungeons, background information and rumours and legends, as well as many new monsters. So we go inside, we've got the maps here. This is the upper level and the guard tower level. We've got basically the cover there with exactly the same text. And then introduction. Great many things found in Palace of the Silver Princess are there to add colour and give the DM ideas upon which to expand. Dungeon Master's information. We've got the legend. Ancient legends of the land speak of a beautiful young princess called Argenta. It tells how the elves and dwarves loved working with her. Her kingdom was prosperous, healthy, until a ruby was found. One day, according to legend, a ruby the size of an apple was found. A perfect ruby. The dwarves cut the ruby carefully so its size would not be diminished. The elves polished the ruby until it shone so that it was impossible to gaze upon. They presented it to the princess and told her that it was lovely as she, and they called it My Lady's Heart. So pleased was the princess that she decided to honour her friends, the elves and dwarves, with a grand party, a masquerade ball. Everyone was invited. But along with the people that attended the party, there was this person who stole it, and corruption came upon the valley later on. With the gem gone, a dragon turned up with a rider. They laid waste to the valley. And now only its ruins remain. But the idea that the gem is somewhere still in the palace remains, which is why the players will be searching for it. We've got a picture to go with that, of the dragon, of the castles, etc. We've got detailing different places, because we've got a very nice map here, with the Palace of the Silver Princess, the Misty Swamp, some settlements, Nassau, Thorold, Mere, the Abaddon Woods, Gulliver, Dead Mule, the Thunder Mountains, and if I flick back to the page before, we can see they're all detailed out. It's a very nice setting with lots of information in there, which really isn't used in the adventure. In one of the settlements, there's the Tinker and his daughter, which will introduce the players to the ideas and stories. We've got some rules here about drowning. We've got the standard rumours that were in early adventures, which give people hints of possible things within it. Some of them are true, some of them are lies. We've got ones marked with F because they are false. Portcullises, double portcullises and doors, extra rules, how to use Wandering Monster table, with the entrance level with acolytes, bandits, kobolds, orcs, skeletons and cave bears, and the upper level has goblins, ubu, bandits, berserkers, hobgoblins and gelatinous cubes. How to use the area descriptions. And this is where we come on to the meat of the adventure. And this is a lot more like modern adventures. We've got boxed out text here. The entrance way seems to be impassable. A massive and foreboding double portcullis blocks the entryway on a 30-foot wide corridor. A breeze is gently blowing from the palace corridor, and it carries with it the dust of decayed stone and smell of decaying bodies. Occasionally sounds of pain, fright and hunger can be heard, but they are far away and sometimes muffled. So all that may be heard is short piercing scream and then total silence. And then we've got a description of what's actually there. Now, sometimes these are long. We've got multiple paragraphs here. The next one, 2 passageways seem to be seen here. Each is behind a double portcullis. First one leads south, second one extends west. It will take a total of 20 strength points to raise either of these portcullises. There are monster treasure in this area. And that's kind of what it's like. We've got things here where there's purple moss, and we've got the stats for it there. A huge cave. The 12 bubbles will rise to the surface to defend their lair. An empty room. The DM may wish to insert an encounter of his or her own choosing, or stock the room with valueless items designed to waste a party's time. This also applies to other empty rooms provided throughout this, with no description, monster, treasure or trap, but space to write something in. And there's other ones as we flick on through. This is one of the pieces of artwork that apparently the higher up at TSR objected to, where it's a woman tied up with her own hair being stabbed by a group of figures around her. Carrying on through, different indicators, elongated hexagonal room. In this room, shaped exactly like the last one, is a large pool. Another hexagonal room, another space for additions. Sometimes the rooms have a description. This area seems to have some kind of explosion or earthquake. Rubble covers the floor. Occasional whimpers like those from a puppy can be heard. Frequently start only to stop a few seconds later. The whimpering is only the wind blowing through the rubble, with no monster, but a space to add one if you want. So that's what it's like. Some rooms are totally blank. Some have a description which the game master can populate, whereas a number of the rooms are fully detailed out. One of the things as you go through the rooms is there are paintings of the princess holding the ruby. And in the paintings, she's always holding this big ruby, about the size of an apple. But when the players actually find it, although it's valuable, I believe it's worth 10,000 gold pieces, it's actually a much smaller ruby. About the size of an eyeball, I suppose. Carrying on through, we've got different encounters. They will find the ruby within there, but they'll also encounter the warrior that rode the dragon, or an ancestor of them, and they're carrying a magical sword. You'll face off against them. We've got the upper level, the key to that. Now, this is the image which people claim has the faces of various TSR higher-ups or developers. Now, these do look like people's faces, obviously in caricature, but these three-headed, three-armed, and apparently three-legged monsters are unique to this adventure and were removed in the Tom Waldway version. I don't know who was in TSR back then, so do not recognise any of these faces, although in caricature some of them do look slightly familiar, so perhaps I have seen pictures in the past. Lots more descriptions, very detailed. Some of them have the monsters in. As I said, this is a guard station, but the space for monsters, treasure and trap to be added. This appears to be an empty room with spaces to add to it. Another piece of artwork. I can't see how anybody would eject to that one. A trap going off, spilling some poison, acid, tar or something on a hapless halfling. Carrying on through, we've got the encounters, and then the guard tower. Now, the guard tower is patrolled by monsters, the protectors, and they roam between it. So while it does describe what the areas are like, they're not treated as separate rooms. It's treated as one large area with just descriptive areas as the players move around. Then we've got the credits, the new monsters. So we've got Archer Bushes, the Barrack, Bubbles, which are just bubbles which can attack people. Giant air pockets that have been given life and intelligence by countless unsuccessful magical potion experiments that were discarded into the water where they were formed. The Decapus, the Diger or Digger, Ghosts, giant marble snakes, Jupiter bloodsuckers, giant marmoset monkeys, poltergeists, the Protectors which roam the entire tower, purple moss, and then the Ubu. These beings vaguely resemble humans but have 3 heads, 3 arms and 3 legs. One of the 3 heads will always be of a different sex from the other 2. It will always be in the middle. The sex of the Ubu is determined by how many heads it has of one sex. 2 male heads indicates it will be male and vice versa. Then we've got a bunch of magic items, so Anterion Brandy, which can be gifted to the players by one of the NPCs in the adventure, and the Sword of Spartusia, which is a magic sword which also seems to be crafted out of a ruby, but you can still find the original ruby, so I was sort of confused. I thought at first that this gem had been stolen and they'd crafted it into this magic sword, but it just seems to be a coincidence that both of them have rubies. Anyway, we've got a glossary of terms, pre-roll monster encounters, expanding the dungeon suggestions, upper level monsters, different treasure that can be found, different traps that can be found. We've got naming conventions, special monster reactions, major personalities, so the NPCs which are in it, as well as the NPCs which might be encountered in the country. Ready to play characters, lots of them for the players just to grab and play. And equipment that they might have. They can choose Pack A, Pack B, or Pack C. And then we've got a map of the lower level, the entrance level. So the inside cover had the upper level in the tower. This is the entrance level where the players will enter. And a back cover. Now, this is a really nice adventure, actually. Again, it's a step ahead. I really like what she's done. I haven't looked at all the adventures. Obviously, I haven't looked at B1 or B2 yet to see whether they're a similar style. But this seems a leap ahead of what Gary Gygax was bringing out at the time and what was being released. But the entire idea that it was withdrawn because of some dodgy art seems ridiculous. But I'm guessing the Satanic Panic was in full flow. The idea of sharing an image of somebody being tortured in a book for kids, perhaps. But I don't know. I do tend to believe the idea that some of those faces were people within TSR and they took offence to it. So that was Palace's Silver Princess, and that won the poll this week with a massive 38% of the vote, proving kind of that the big games do dominate these polls. Dungeons & Dragons, obviously being the biggest role-playing game, has got a large chunk, but often Shadowrun, Call of Cthulhu, Star Wars dominate these polls as well. And it has been suggested that I run polls with just Star Wars, with just Cthulhu, with just Shadowrun, and with just Dungeons & Dragons material in them. So the smaller games do get a chance in the polls when they are included. But rather weirdly, in second place this week is one of those smaller games, because Out in the Black for the Serenity role-playing game came in on 20%. It often places way lower than that, so weird in this poll it did reach a good position. But 20% is small compared to that massive 38%. Behind that was Resection of Time for Call of Cthulhu. In fourth position was The Outcasts for the Star Trek role-playing game from FASA with 14%. And way up behind was The Last War Hulk for Alternity on 11%, which is sad. I would like to cover that at some point because I'm a recent convert to Alternity. I think it's a great system, and I'd love to have a look at one of the few adventures published for it. But alas, not this time. Now they're all cleared out, and we're going for a retro RPG poll. But this one's going to be a bit different. You see, the last couple of times when I've mentioned that people have suggested games for me to cover, and I've put them in the polls, and when they've won, I've covered them. And this is kind of wonderful, because I set up this channel to introduce people to some of the games in my collection here. But now we're getting to the place where you, the viewers, can introduce me to games out of your collection. And I'm seeing some wonderful games out there. And during the last video when I did this, I asked for suggestions. And I got absolutely deluged with them. There were dozens upon dozens of suggestions. Some people sent in massive lists themselves, but lots of people sent in one or two ideas. So I've got loads to cover me. But if you've got some more, please send them on in. But this time, they're all suggestions. And many of them are games I've never even looked at. A couple of them I've played. One of them I've got in my collection and I don't know why I've never covered before. But it'll be fantastic to look through these, especially as these are the things you want to see. So first up, we've got Castle Falkenstein by R. Talzorian Games from 1994. Now this is a steampunk role-playing game, and I have to admit, in the game stores in the 90s, I had this in my hand many occasions, but I just never got around to buying it. Steampunk is a lovely setting, something which I really enjoyed reading novels on. And the idea of the game appealed to me a lot. But for some reason, I just never bought it. So it'll be wonderful to look at it this time. Next up, we've got Against the Dark Master by Open-Ended Games, which came out in only 2021. Now this is a retro remake of either Rollmaster or MERP. I've been told MERP, but looking online, I've seen people suggest it's a retro remake of Rollmaster. Both by Iron Crown Enterprises, and games that I've covered a little or been looking forward to covering at some point. And it'd be wonderful to cover a retro remake and see what they've done, updating it to modern rule sets. But it is a bit of a burden for my back, I have to admit, because it's about 600 pages long, so that's going to be fun to look through in a week if it starts winning. After that, we've got Legend of the Five Rings by Five Rings Publishing from 1997. Now, I believe this is a martial arts game. I really don't know much about it, so this will be a complete education for me if it wins. Looking forward to it because I do enjoy these things. After that, we've got Cyberpunk, the 2013 version, which was released in 1998. Now, I've got this in my collection. I bought it when it came out. This was the version of Cyberpunk I looked at it first. A wonderful, wonderful game. And why I've never covered it, I don't know. But somebody asked me to cover it, so I'm overjoyed to be including it now. And finally, we've got Edge of the Empire from Fantasy Flight Games in 2013. Now, this is one of the Star Wars games. Now, obviously, I'm a big fan of the Star Wars D6 system. I've talked about the D20 Dungeons & Dragons 3rd edition version that Wizard of the Coast brought out around about 2000. But I've played this one. I played a full campaign and had great fun during it. I do have my problems with the system, but it'd be great to cover it and discuss those problems I have with you, and for the fans of the game to come to me and show me the joy that they've found for it. But let's see what wins. There's 5 absolutely brilliant suggestions in there, and I'll be overjoyed to cover any of them. What else has been going on? Well, I've been really busy. We've got things going on in the family at the moment, so I haven't had as much time as possible, but I am doing my daily updates to RPG Gamer. We've been covering the Tales of the Empire series, and in only a week's time, my time, the Acolyte series starts, so I'll be doing reviews of those and statting them out for the website as time goes on. I'm also going to start covering the Knights of the Old Republic comic series, which came out in the early 2010s, which follow on from the video games. And I'll be working my way through every issue of that, reviewing them, statting them out. There's quite a bundle, I think there's about 100 issues, so that should take me a chunk of the rest of the year. But anyway, as usual, I've been wittering on for quite long enough, so thank you very much for watching. But as always, most of all, you look after yourselves, and I'll catch you later. Bye now.